People struggle to get pregnant and they don't think ovaries, you're right, they think uterus. But when you think about causes of infertility, number one, ovaries, followed by sperm. Uterus is way, 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 way down.
Yes.
So when women struggle to become pregnant, the first thing they need to think of is truly eggs.
From our Building Your Family community, this is the Building Your Family podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Schumann, author, researcher, and reproductive medicine therapist. As the leading destination for support and education for people using reproductive medicine to grow their families, we cut through the noise to provide you with research-based information, effective and actionable strategies, and the support that you need to feel better so you can get into the driver's seat of your life and build the family of your dreams. We look forward to seeing you inside. Welcome to a new episode of the Building Your Family podcast. Today, we are going to talk about something that's really important to talk about in detail, which is surrogacy. As you know, I worked for a very long time in the surrogacy area when I was working at a fertility clinic, and I was asked to testify before the New York State Judiciary Committee to legalize compensated surrogacy in New York, because although many people probably think that New York is a very modern state and we know a lot of things here about science and all sorts of lifestyles, the truth is that confusing information does exist about surrogacy all over the place, in every level of education, in every culture. And so I thought it was really important to talk about it in detail today so everybody could have a clear idea of what to think about when they think about surrogacy. So I thought that you could meet somebody who's really special. Her name is Dr. Susanna Park from San Diego Fertility. She's a reproductive endocrinologist, but also a surgeon, a specialist in IVF, LGBTQ health, PGT, recurrent pregnancy loss, and so many other things. She has a passion for helping her patients, both domestically and internationally, and you've actually met one of her patients on this podcast, Tara Lipinski. She's worked with everyone, people like you and I, average people, and also celebrities, because everybody knows that Dr. Park not only is brilliant, but she is compassionate. And she will share with us today all the things that you need to know about surrogacy. So thank you so much for coming, Dr. Park, and thank you in advance for giving us your insight. I'm so excited to talk to you about this really important topic.
Thank you, Lisa, for the warm introduction. And as a former New Yorker, I grew up there for most of my life. It is surprising, isn't it, that surrogacy only became legal so recently, right?
Yes. Very, very surprising. I think most of us here were very surprised. And we know that not only did it just become legal, compensated surrogacy, but it was such a fight to get there because there was so much misinformation about it. And I think that's a great place to start, because many people think that surrogacy is the same here as it is in other places where people really struggle financially, and there's this image that people are compensated, and in some way, because of that compensation, they're persuaded to do it, and people are being taken advantage of, and that is just not true here. Is that right?
Correct. And that is such a common myth, and that's why surrogacy is not practiced very often outside the United States, because people do think it's taking advantage of women. And that very well may be the case outside the United States, but it's not here. So one of the criteria to be a surrogate is you have to be financially stable. You cannot be on public assistance and be a surrogate. And so that really motivates women to do this for the right reason. I mean, of course, the extra money helps, of course, but that compensation should not be their sole means of financial stability. So these surrogates have jobs, and then the compensation they get is just cream on top. It's icing on top, right? But it's not their sole financial means.
Yes.
These are women who, just like you and me, right? We work, we have families, we go about our daily lives. And these are women who in addition to the responsibilities they have at home and at work, they so enjoyed being pregnant and they feel that, hey, if I got pregnant so easily, I would love to give this gift to others who are in need.
Yes. And what's so amazing to me, and I suspect you see a lot of this also, but in so many of the surrogates that I've seen, I see this kind of special quality even that I would like to be that altruistic, even though I think I'm a nice person. I see these surrogates and they're just amazing with how compassionate they really are. I mean, it almost seems that it's unreal how much they really want to give to people. I mean, I've had surrogates say, I can't wait to see the expression on the intended parents' faces when the baby comes, or I think I'm going to miss the intended parents more than the baby. You know, people just seem so surprised to hear that, but it's true. These are really special women.
Absolutely. And not everybody develops such a close bond to the surrogate, but I have seen relationships where truly the two families have actually blended, become one. They converse with each other on a regular basis, they update each other. It's amazing. It's really special to see.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. And, you know, we spoke before about how there's such a wide range of relationships and surrogates and experiences, and how maybe what's right for one person isn't exactly right for someone else. And then sometimes it even surprises us to see a surrogate who may be very directive, and then the parents are really happy to have a directive surrogate, for example. And so every match can be very different, and people can appreciate that. But I think the hard part comes when people feel attached to their surrogate and then maybe they don't pass medical screening. And then they say, why can't I use a surrogate? We love her. She's so great. Can you share with us a few of the reasons why, from your side of the table, why it's so hard? Because I'm sure for you, you see these patients who really want to be matched with that surrogate, and you have to give them this bad news that maybe that's not the right person for them.
I know. It is always hard to give that bad news. So, in the beginning, when the surrogate submits her application, keep in mind that these are lay people. And on their application, they're supposed to write any complications they had. And it's not that they're intentionally being deceiving, but when you're full of hormones and you delivered, sometimes you don't remember everything that happened. So many times we have these surrogates who write these applications and they say uncomplicated, uncomplicated, which is great because that gets them through the initial screening process with the agency. But then our job is to get those hospital records. We get both the hospital records as well as the OBGYN's office records. And many times as we go through the records, we realize, oh, you had some blood pressure issues. Oh, you had some elevated sugar level. Oh, you had some contractions and you need to be on bed rest, or you had to modify your behavior. And many times this was not something that happened last month. This was years ago. And all of us forget stuff that happened years
Of course,
ago,
yes.
right? It's normal. And
Hmm.
so sometimes these surrogates will submit these applications, but then we are the ones who look at it and we say, oh, wait a minute. This and this happened. She's not a good surrogate. Now, nobody has a perfect surrogate. Nobody has a perfect pregnancy. All of us have had something in the pregnancy, right? So it's okay to find things in the history. We just don't want to find severe things. So, for example, let's say she had a history of it's okay if her blood pressure was a little elevated, but what if it was significantly elevated? And then they had to give medications not only during labor, but even after labor, right? So we're really looking for significant medical issues that can pose as risk factors for future pregnancies. So medical records review is the first part. Once she passes that, then we do want all surrogates to come to our office for in-person evaluation. And some people may feel that, oh my goodness, why can't she do this locally? And she can, but we really dissuade that because it helps for us, and there are multiple people she will interact with. It helps for us to speak with her, to observe her, to see who does she come with, and watch her behavior, watch her response, watch her willingness to do this. And I will say that most surrogates who come to our office in person for evaluation pass that medical evaluation. Okay. So I have excluded a few surrogates because upon my interaction with them, there was just something that was off. And many of our
Mm,
intended parents physically don't meet these surrogates. So really, they rely on us. We are not affiliated with the agency. We are independent of the agency. They rely on us to be their eyes and ears. Okay. And then, of course, separate from the social aspect, there's the medical aspect. Of course, we will do a full physical exam, look at their uterus, make sure it's okay, drug screen, smoking screen, infection screen. And it really helps to do all of that in person.
hmm
Once all those tests come back, then we render medical clearance. So it's a pretty involved process. It's very comprehensive.
Yes, very comprehensive. And there's things that can come up, right? Like I've recently had a very difficult situation with a surrogate who is in the middle of a very contentious separation from her husband
Mm,
and didn't share that information. And that could be a real problem for the intended parents, even though they liked her and they thought, well, what's the difference? It could be a problem in the process. Could you explain why that might be a problem in her being a surrogate and how that would affect her experience, her treatment, the whole process?
So, one of the main criteria is a stable family. Now, we all have issues that go on in life, but out the gate, you really want to choose a surrogate who will have support. And it's okay that she's divorced, but she needs support in her home as well as her surrounding friends and family. But the other thing, of course, is trust, right? And I know it was not intentional, but when you are embarking on this journey together as a team, you as a surrogate need to let intended parents know when there's a change in your status. And that's one for trust because you want them to know I'm not hiding anything from you. This is what's happening. But the other thing is also medical, especially in this case. Let's say her divorce finishes and then intended parents realize, okay, well, what if she becomes intimate with somebody else? That then introduces the factor of a potential infection, which can then affect the pregnancy. And for that reason, there needs to be constant open communication about how stable your family is as you're going, not only from the beginning, but as you're going through the journey.
Yes. And all the things she has to do along the way can be affected, right? Her doctor's appointments and all sorts of things that she needs to do because people say, well, she had her last baby and she had difficulty in her relationship, but there's more required in a surrogacy journey, right?
Correct. And there's no right answer. I have intended parents who see a certain situation, they say, you know what? We're okay with this. And they have a very open discussion with the surrogate and the agency. And I have other intended parents, very similar situation, and their response is, this makes me very nervous. I don't want to be a part of this. I need more stability. I'm going to ask the agency to find another surrogate. And that's okay too. But I think the important thing is that you are able to honestly express how you feel with the agency so that I don't want intended parents to feel afraid to speak up because they don't want to rock the boat. I think that
hmm
that is not a great start to the relationship.
And it's so important for them to lean on their provider, right? For the patient to come to you and say, Dr. Park, I'm concerned about this thing or that thing, because the agencies are not the physicians. They are not the people who can say, this is a thing that can pose a problem. Just like you mentioned, high blood pressure can cause so many problems. And maybe somebody says, well, I had high blood pressure, but they're not the physicians. So you really need to be the person to help guide them more than their agency in that way.
Mhm. And also, they realize we are independent from the agency. So my answer will truly be a very neutral answer. And oh, yes, I get emails like that from intended parents frequently where something will come up. This morning, I had to answer one. And again, it was more social than medical, but something happened in the surrogate's personal life. And I'm not judging the surrogate, I understand, but it was a lapse of judgment. And it created a big problem in her family. And the intended parents emailed me. They said, what should we do? And I just told them the pros and cons of each decision. And, I reassured them, like, You need to feel comfortable with whatever decision you make, but here are the potential consequences of each decision.
Yes, that's so important. And it's so important for as you say, the intended parents to have trust.
Yep.
And if a patient is feeling like there's any concern, we don't know when that's going to arise. I mean, I've seen both donors and surrogates have medical, psychological screening and medical screening that maybe looks a little bit shaky and they think, well, what's the difference? This person's going to be fine. People have had difficulties in their life, but you're talking a long time. You're going to be with this person for a long time. And if things come up over the course of the pregnancy, you need to make sure that they're going to make the right decision.
Yep, correct. And the trust, Lisa, goes both ways, right? So I've had surrogates who feel that, and I know it comes from just a place of just needing reassurance, but intended parents who just seem to want a lot from the surrogate.
Mm-hmm.
And this surrogate, who I know was not well one day, she just had a cold, but she felt that she couldn't tell the intended parents that because she was afraid that they were going to get even more anxious. And so,
Yes.
right. So, and I understand if the surrogate doesn't want to feel that intended parent is overly concerned because they already seem so concerned. So the trust needs to go both ways, that the intended parents kind of need to realize, okay, I can't be a helicopter intended parent. There has to be some level of
Yes.
trust where you have to realize how much to be there and how much is sort of to step back.
And sometimes I think that that's, really part of the match process, right? Because if someone wants a surrogate who's going to be in touch with them all the time and is going to eat organic food and is going to, stop her Pilates workout at, month one or whatever they want, maybe it's better to wait for a surrogate who meets that criteria than to go with someone who's a little bit more casual and if they're going to feel anxious around.
Agreed.
And what are the issues that we could see come up maybe when you have a screening with a surrogate and have some concern about her uterus? Maybe she presents as just fine and the agency thinks she's fine and the intended parents think she's fine. What sorts of uterine problems could you see where you would say, this is probably not a good idea?
Mm-hmm. So, one of the biggest risk factors we see are surrogates with a history of premature delivery. So,
Mm,
when women are pregnant, you're given a due date, and your due date is 40 weeks of pregnancy. But full term is actually 37 weeks, which means that if the surrogate delivered a week or two or three before the due date, that's okay. Anything before 37 weeks is considered premature. So if we have a surrogate who truly has delivered prematurely, she would never even make it for in-person evaluation because we already excluded her. But sometimes some premature deliveries are very conditional. It was based upon a certain event that happened at that moment. And sometimes we'll see surrogates who delivered a baby at 35 weeks. But then if you look at our next pregnancy, which was still for her own family, it was a full-term delivery. Okay, so assuming that she didn't have any major red flags, when she comes in for evaluation, when we look at the uterus, we put water into the uterus. It's called a saline sonogram because the walls of a uterus are naturally closed. But if you put water in there, it forces that cavity to open up. And what we're looking for are things like polyps or a fibroid, or perhaps there's scar tissue in there, something in there that is not allowing that cavity to be this beautiful, normally shaped space. Now, the good news is any polyps or fibroids or scar tissue that we find in the uterus is such an easy surgery. The surrogate needs a surgery called a hysteroscopy, hyst for uterus, oscopy for camera, hysteroscopy. And we do encourage her to do it with her OB/GYN so she could try to perhaps use her insurance to get this done. If not, of course, we can do it at our center. And it's done not at that visit, at a different visit. But it's a super simple surgery, outpatient. It takes not even 45 minutes. And usually that's enough to normalize the uterus, and she could still be your surrogate. So it's very different from a huge medical surgery that would really exclude her from being a surrogate. But of course, it's very important to make sure that that uterus is normal because that's where the baby will grow.
So you might find some of these difficulties and then have to say to the intended parents, she may not be the best surrogate for you. And that can be hard if the intended parents are already attached to her,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so this whole system kind of sets us up in a difficult situation for the physicians, because you're in this situation where maybe intended parents are already getting attached before we know if this is going to be a good match for them.
Yep. Thankfully, most of these uterus issues are solvable, but sometimes the issue we run into is the thickness of the lining, right? So when they come in, we measure the thickness of the lining, and sometimes it's not as thick as we want it to be, and that's okay. Every clinic has a different cutoff for what they want as the thickness of the lining, but most clinics will use 7, 8, or 9. We happen to use 8. In addition to thickness, you want a certain pattern. It's called a triple layer pattern, these beautiful 3 white lines. So we want thickness and pattern. And it's okay if they don't have it when they come in, because then what we tell them is, okay, you can at home do a trial run. We'll manage you from here, but let's just make sure the lining of the uterus thickens up. And it's so frustrating when it doesn't. We'll try one protocol. If it doesn't work, I'll try a different protocol. If that doesn't work, I'll try another protocol. But at some point, even I will say, okay, we've given it our best and it's not working. And Lisa, one of the biggest risk factors for that is an IUD, especially the progesterone IUD, which is the Kyleena, the Mirena, because those IUDs, there are multiple ways how they prevent pregnancy, but one of them is it keeps your lining very thin. And so when you pull out that IUD, for most women, that lining just bounces back and it's great. But there is a subset of women where it just does not bounce back. And so we try all these protocols to get that lining to thicken, and it just doesn't. And unfortunately, that's not something we know until after she's come in for medical evaluation, until after we've tried all these different protocols. Right. And then, of course, you're so bonded to your surrogate only for us to say to you, I'm really sorry, but this uterus is just not working.
That's so difficult. Yeah. Imagine your beautiful future. You're snuggling with your child. You feel so connected to them. Your friends and family are so happy, and you have everything that you've ever wanted. I want this for you too, but I want more than that. I want you to feel secure knowing that you've made the best decisions, not just short-term, but long-term for your future family. Wherever you are on your journey, whether you're choosing a donor, choosing a clinic, learning how to talk to your donor-conceived child about their origins, all of these decisions will have wider implications for your future. And I want you to have the right resources so you can feel empowered and confident at this very important time in your life. That's why I'm so excited to introduce you to Building Your Family. It's the only expert-guided platform designed for parents and parents-to-be using reproductive medicine. We provide unique strategies that you won't find anywhere else to make your path to parenthood smoother and more informed. And that's why our approach is about offering practical and actionable steps that you can use right now. Whether you're just starting out or already deep into your process, Building Your Family is here to guide you with expert advice, specialized education, stress reduction strategies, and a community to support you every step of the way. We can't wait to see you inside. So it's probably better for the intended parents to fall in like instead of falling in love. Right?
Yes. Well said.
Yeah. Because you just don't know.
Yeah.
Right? You just don't know. It can be so tough. And what about the other side, Dr. Park? I see this very often where people will come to me and say, well, I'm trying to get pregnant and it's not working. And I feel like maybe, unfortunately, I'm going to need a surrogate to get pregnant. And so I appreciate that most of us don't remember our 10th grade biology, but I think that it's very natural for a lot of women in particular, or people with ovaries, to kind of think about there being something wrong with their uterus first rather than their eggs first. So can you clear that up for us?
What a great question. I get that all the time, Lisa, that people struggle to get pregnant and they don't think ovaries. You're right. They think uterus. But When you think about causes of infertility, number one, ovaries, followed by sperm. Uterus is way, 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 way down.
Yes.
So when women struggle to become pregnant, the first thing they need to think of is truly eggs.
Yeah.
And I hear so much women say to me, but I am so healthy. I know. But unfortunately, time, in terms of ovarian health, does not care how healthy you are. I have these amazing, healthy 40-year-old women. I mean, so fit. And yet, unfortunately, when you do their egg test, it's not great. And then, of course, I have these maybe not so healthy 32-year-old women, and their eggs are amazing, right?
Right.
And I'm a firm believer, yes, 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 health is so important for every aspect of your body, including your eggs. But unfortunately, health alone is not enough to combat the impact of time on your ovaries. So you are 100% correct. You got to think eggs before uterus when you're struggling to become pregnant.
Yes. And that's so hard, I think, for some people to grasp, because emotionally, to disconnect yourself from your genetic relationship to your child, I think, is one of the most painful things a lot of women feel. But I guess the upside is that it is certainly less expensive. Surrogacy journeys are so expensive typically. And it is something that can be done relatively easily, whereas you have to wait for a surrogate for a long time. It takes a lot of time to figure out how to find a surrogate, how to find an agency. And there's really no way to figure that out, which I think for most of us, I think in this field is very frustrating. So how would you help people, intended parents, if they do need a surrogate, think about, well, what should I do next? I have to find a surrogate. How do I know which agency to choose? How do I know where to find somebody? Maybe I should find somebody who's close by. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should find someone who's like me. Maybe I shouldn't. How do I start to think about where to start?
Yeah, it's difficult because there are, if you Google surrogacy agencies, there are, oh my goodness, right? Thousands that will come up. And of course, they all have great reviews, right, on their site.
Mm-hmm.
So many people do try to find surrogates independently. So I'm not opposed to people finding surrogates independently, but I feel that for a family who's never gone through surrogacy, it makes me very concerned when they try to do this independently for a number of reasons. Number one, you don't know what you don't know. And
Yes.
so the amount of administrative logistical work that goes into this is a lot, but you don't know
A
that
lot.
because you don't know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of patients don't realize, like they think that the fertility clinic will take on this work and the fertility clinics will not. We do the medical part, but you still need somebody to take on the administrative part.
Yes.
So there are people out there who will provide just administrative assistance for your surrogacy journey so that you don't have to pay the whole surrogacy agency fee. The other thing about an independent journey to think about is, and this is not for all surrogates out there, I have met some amazing surrogates through independent journeys. But the question one has to ask is, why is it that most surrogacy journeys are done with the help of an agency? So why is it that there are these women who intentionally decide not to work with an agency? Because their compensation is the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not always, but sometimes the answer to that is because an agency would not accept her, right?
Mm.
And so we realize that because when we then get her medical records, which either she has to give to us or the intended parents have to contact the hospital, the OB/GYN office to get us the records, we realize, oh no, she's got multiple medical issues. Okay, so
Yes.
for the intended parents, just be a little careful. Ask yourself, why is it that she is not with an agency, whereas most surrogates are? So for families
Mm-hmm.
doing this for the first time, I really encourage them to really think about working with an agency. And there are all types of agencies out there. I know it's expensive, but there are agencies from various price points that we can refer
Yes.
you to. But I really, for your first journey, encourage that because you need that guidance. And if you do this independently without an agency, and especially if it's a surrogate who's done this before, and of course you'll have a lawyer to guide you, but still the surrogate has been through this, so she knows what she should and should not be asking for. And the intended parents don't know that. And so there is that possibility of the surrogate having an upper hand, right, on the intended parent. So I just caution intended parents, I will fully support it, but you need to make sure you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's through the surrogacy journey. Or you say, okay, I will work with a surrogacy agency. How do you choose? Well, that's tough. There are a lot of really good agencies out there. And I'm sure there are some agencies out there that maybe are not as great. I mean, in the year, Lisa, we do over 600 surrogacy cycles in 1 year. We do a lot. So we work with so many great surrogacy agencies throughout the United States, so of different price points, right? So we can absolutely guide you and refer you to different agencies. And I know their agency fees are expensive, absolutely, but there is a service you're getting for that agency fee. Not only are they taking on all the administrative work, the logistical work, making sure your surrogate is able to get here, her airfare, her hotel, her food, etc., but they're also your partner in this journey. Right. So from the time they introduce you to that surrogate till the time your baby comes out, and many times even thereafter, they are there to make sure you go from point A to point Z. Because the fertility clinics, we will do all the medical part, but once your surrogate is pregnant, at about 8-9 weeks, we stop our care. And then the OB/GYN will take over care and deliver your baby. The surrogacy agency is with you till that very end. So that's what you're really paying for, is their guidance, their support. If there's an issue between the intended parents and the surrogate and you, the intended parent, you don't feel so comfortable bringing it up, that's okay. That's why you have your surrogacy agency. You discuss it with them and they will find a way to address that concern you have. So they play a pivotal role in your journey. They're very important.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And all of these things that could happen along the way, as you say, you don't know what you don't know. But for all of you out there, there's so many things that can happen along the way. Money has to be dispersed. We may have issues like medical testing problems, termination questions, all kinds of things that can arise along the journey. And the agency hopefully can help you step by step deal with those things with your surrogate. And if the agency has a lot of experience, it's easier for everyone, right? It's easier for the intended parents and the surrogate, and I would imagine the physician, because the agency knows what they're doing.
Absolutely. And some agencies, they're all run by different types of people. Some agencies are run by former surrogates. Some agencies are run by a lawyer. Some agencies are run by former intended parents who had their family through surrogacy. So these are all people who have some kind of experience in the industry, be it professional or personal. So they know what the intended parent is going through. They know what's important. And they can support you because they've been there in one way, shape, or form.
Yes, very important. And what about a surrogacy journey that is known? So somebody says, I want my cousin or my best friend or my sister to carry a pregnancy, or even some people want their parents to carry their pregnancy for them. How would you advise people about that?
I think it's so beautiful when friends or family members offer to be surrogate. I mean, what a gift, right? It's so beautiful. The problem is they don't always meet the criteria. So our national organization, which is the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, ASRM, has minimum surrogate criteria, which is ages of 20 to 45. I will tell you, Lisa, personally, I'm not fond of a 45-year-old surrogate, but that's just my personal point of view. 5 or less deliveries, 3 or less C-sections, stable family, which we've mentioned in the past. And then, of course, medically, infection, uterus, she has to pass all of that. We also have a BMI criteria, body mass index, of under 32, but that's something that our clinic has come up with on our own. So usually when it's a family member or friend that's giving you this amazing gift, I'm a little bit more lax with my criteria, but not all of them. So for example, let's say she is 43. Okay. I'm more willing to entertain her because you're not paying her to be a surrogate. She's doing this out of the generosity of her heart. Then, of course, I have a whole conversation with the intended parents and with the surrogate. But these are the risks of being pregnant at the age of 43, right? Weight is the other issue. I have so many people who have surrogates, which is again, family member or friend, and their BMI may be 35. Okay, so everybody needs to be educated. What does it mean to be pregnant with a body mass index of 35? So if it's a family member or a friend, I am a bit more lax in my criteria, but as long as everybody understands that you are potentially taking on more risk.
And so, what are some of those risks so that people out there can know? Because lots of people say, I don't really understand this BMI criteria because I know there are people around the country who are extremely overweight and they have healthy babies. And so, why can't I use my cousin, even though she's very overweight, as a surrogate?
I know, and I don't know why we tell people it's so important to have a healthy weight for pregnancy. And then you're right, you see people who are very overweight who have these uncomplicated pregnancies. Absolutely. But the data is actually very clear that when you are very overweight, you are increasing your risk for high blood pressure. And why does that matter? Well, if it's just high blood pressure, that's okay. The problem is high blood pressure in pregnancy can become a very severe form, which is called preeclampsia, where not only do you have high blood pressure, but now your body is becoming very swollen. Your liver starts to not function well. So your
Mm-hmm.
liver platelets, your liver enzymes go up. And then your platelets start to drop, which means you're prone to bleeding. You can even have visual problems. And if this does not get addressed, because the only solution for this, you can put people on blood pressure medicine, but when they've entered this part of preeclampsia, the only solution is delivering that baby. Because if you don't deliver the baby, you become what's called eclampsia, which is a full seizure. And when you have a full seizure, then there's zero oxygen going to the baby. So the purpose of trying to not have a surrogate become preeclamptic or eclamptic is you're trying to keep the baby healthy. Now, somebody could say, well, that's fine. They just deliver the baby. Great. That's great if your surrogate's 37, 38 weeks pregnant. But what if this happens and she's only 29 weeks pregnant?
Yes, yes.
That's the problem, right? And so nobody can predict with her weight, is she going to become preeclamptic? Nobody knows, but we do know that her weight puts her at increased risk for that. The other one is diabetes, right? Again, everybody knows somebody who's diabetic, they got pregnant, and everything went well. Yes, the problem with diabetes is babies grow very big, but their lungs proportionally do not mature as fast. So you can have this huge baby, but the lungs are very immature. And so that puts the surrogate at increased risk for having to deliver by C-section, by cesarean section, right? Because the baby's too big to come out vaginally. And then, of course, when the baby comes out, because the baby's so used to living this environment with high blood sugar, its blood sugars tank, right? So you have to make sure you have your pediatricians there to assess the baby and stabilize it. Again, not ideal. Okay.
Yes,
The other
yes.
thing with being very overweight, in and of itself, increased risk for C-sections, but stillbirth. And we don't fully understand this. But the risk of just this unexpected stillbirth goes up when somebody is overweight.
That's very scary.
Mm-hmm.
And scary for the person who's carrying also, right?
Absolutely, right? Because they have young kids. Most of these surrogates have young children. So we're here to protect not only the baby, but the surrogate as well, who is a mom. And we want her to remain a healthy mother to her children.
Yeah, so it's so important.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question I get a lot about surrogates is, do they really need to be vaccinated? Do they need to be vaccinated for COVID, for flu, for all of these things that I think in this country in particular right now, we're having so much discourse about?
I fully respect people's viewpoint on vaccination. I personally believe vaccinations help, and I know there are people out there who don't believe it, and that's okay. But when the intended parents match with a surrogate, this has to be a very honest conversation. And it's not to change people's minds, but it's to realize if we are not on the same wavelength, maybe this is not a great match.
Mm-hmm.
Vaccines save lives. Vaccines
Yes.
prevent
Yes.
babies from birth defects, right? If the surrogate is not immune to, let's say, chickenpox, and let's say she has a kid, goes to a birthday party, her kid contracts chickenpox, and now the surrogate contracts chickenpox and she's pregnant, there is a risk that that baby can have birth defects from the chickenpox because she was not immune. There's so many other viruses that can create birth defects. The rubella virus, the herpes virus, there's so many other viruses, toxoplasmosis, right? So I
Mm.
am a believer of vaccination, but I also respect that people have different viewpoints. So the surrogate and the intended parents have to be aligned on this.
Yes. And they need to understand from someone like you, Dr. Park, what the consequences could be. So at least they have all of the information. We hear very often people say, well, I didn't take the flu shot this year and I didn't get sick. Therefore, the flu shot is ineffective, right? And those two things don't go together, right? Just because we didn't get the flu, that doesn't mean that that's because we didn't take the vaccine. And people don't also realize that people do die of the flu still, right? It still can happen.
100%. Actually, before I had my own kids, and even though I'm very pro vaccine, the one vaccine I didn't like to take was the flu vaccine. So I would actually just decline it every year. And then it wasn't until I was pregnant that it was my OB/GYN that said to me, listen, you really need to take the flu vaccine because now you're pregnant, which means you're immunocompromised, meaning your immune system is not as strong. So I did. And then once my kids were born, my pediatrician said to me, you need to take the flu vaccine because you need to protect your little newborn from becoming infected with the flu. And same thing with the surrogate. When you're pregnant, you need to protect that little baby from becoming sick with the flu because you are right, Lisa. I know people don't talk about it, but people die from the flu. And these are usually people who are immunocompromised, usually people with medical issues, people who are pregnant, the elderly, the young, etc. So, yes.
Right. And we just never know when you can contract something and then get seriously ill and compromise the surrogate, compromise the baby.
Yep.
So that's so important to understand. And we had so much of this debate during COVID. And I think we're still kind of in that world right now where it's very confusing to a lot of patients. So I really appreciate your insight, Dr. Park.
Mhm.
And then as we kind of move along this journey, how do patients really understand their doctor's role? So someone's looking for a physician and they say, I really need to make sure that this person can help me with surrogacy because not all reproductive endocrinologists handle surrogacy cases, right? And some do more and some do fewer. So how do people make that choice?
So I practiced in New York City, but at that time, because surrogacy was or compensated surrogacy was not legal. When I practiced in New York, I actually didn't do any surrogacy. I did regular IVF, I did egg donor, etc. And it wasn't until I moved out to California about 12 years ago that I realized that surrogacy was legal here, which then opens up your ability to take care of many different types of patients. I think experience is very important. And that's not
Yes.
to say that a clinic that does much less surrogacy agencies is incompetent. Not at all. Surrogacy, this is not rocket science here. I mean, it's not that difficult, right? But the advantage of experience is you are a well-oiled machine. Like you know the law, you've got the systems in place, you've got the people in place, and it's streamlined. And you go from A to B to C to D. It's the same. You know exactly how to do it. So when problems come up, you already know the answer because you know how to address it.
Mm-hmm.
So experience does play a role, absolutely, because it will make things less problematic, more efficient. But For those who live far away, sometimes they think, oh my gosh, but I don't live in California. I live in Massachusetts, for example, or New York or Connecticut. We have intended parents all over the United States. And of course, we have a huge international presence for surrogacy. For surrogacy, we just need the embryos. We actually don't need you to be present, right? So the embryos can be from your own eggs, your own sperm. And sometimes people will come here and make the embryos. Sometimes people already have embryos made in their clinic. They will just transport the embryos, right? So if you're just transporting embryos, you actually never come to our clinic because you just have to go to wherever the surrogate delivers your baby. Because in your absence, we will transfer the embryo into the surrogate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But for intended parents who feel that, oh gosh, that just seems like such a long way, I encourage you, go to your local clinic, especially if you feel comfortable with them. But I would just ask them, just how many cases do they do and do they feel comfortable? And maybe they may say to you, hey, we haven't done too many cases, but we're willing to work with you together just to get you from point A to point Z. And maybe you just have to be a little bit more patient with us as we try to navigate the system. And that's okay too, right? As long as I think everybody has a very honest conversation about experience and number of cycles and when was the last time you've done this type of conversation, I think it's okay. Because at the end of the day, nothing is perfect. There are always things that happen. At the end of the day, you just need a supportive team of somebody who will be honest with you and no matter what happens, will take care of the issue and get you to the end. That's really what you need.
It's very helpful. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you, which is always some source of difficulty, or exists around this continually, even though I think we've talked about it so much. I wrote a paper on this subject some years ago with gay male couples who really want to have a child with both of their genetics, and yet it poses a difficulty because many people used to, way back in the day when I was doing IVF, have twins, and now we don't do that anymore. And there's some reasons for that. And yet it's so difficult for these guys because we're really asking them to pursue two surrogacy journeys, which is incredibly expensive. So they're kind of stuck in this tough situation. And yet what I found is that once they understand the risks involved, they start to change their mind. So can you share with our audience a little bit about that? Because I think people are really not always clear about that.
Yes, gosh, it's so true, Lisa. When I started my career, it's been 21 years now. My goodness, we never put in one embryo, right? Our success rates were so bad. So we would put in 3, 4, and just sort of hope something implanted, right?
Yes,
and that would say 3 embryos.
Yes,
yes. 5 embryos, right?
Yes.
So much has changed in 20 years. Because I'm so used to having transferred multiple embryos in the past, it doesn't scare me to still transfer multiple embryos. I am one of the few doctors left who still will transfer 2, even though they are day 5. But as you said, I need to educate the intended parents and the surrogates. So, number 1, just because I transfer 2 embryos does not mean they will both implant. Okay, and I think a lot of people feel like, okay, we're definitely going to have twins. Not really. Okay. Number 2, not all surrogacy agencies will work with you. Number 3, not all surrogates will choose you, right? Because as much as you choose a surrogate chooses you as well, right? Because the agency may say, we fully support transfer of 2, but they're waiting for a surrogate who also is supportive of transfer of 2. And there aren't as many surrogates who are willing to transfer 2 anymore. Okay, so the intended parents need to be patient. And then let's say the surrogate says, oh, absolutely, I'm okay with 2. Our medical criteria for transfer of 2 is stricter. That is not to say that we're lackadaisical about surrogates in whom we're transferring 1 embryo, but because the risks, which I'll discuss in a second, are higher when transfer of 2, which may result in twins, we have to make sure her risk factors are less. So for example, let's say I have a surrogate who is 5 feet tall, and she has this amazing pregnancy history. Thumbs up for transfer of 1 embryo. But transfer of 2, well, she's never delivered twins before. She's all of 5 feet tall. So I'm going to say no, because her torso is, because she's petite, her torso just, I don't think is long enough to be able to carry twins. Now, if she came to me with a history of twin delivery and she had no issues, that's a different story. Okay. So what are the risks of being pregnant with twins? High blood pressure, which we talked about, diabetes, preterm contractions, right? So let's say she's going about her day and she notices, man, my uterus just keeps contracting. Well, if that keeps happening and she's nowhere close to delivering, she needs to go on bed rest. Okay. Well, if she's on bed rest and she can't work, what then happens to her family? Who's going to take care of her kids? Who's going to do the cooking, the cleaning, if that's what she does? Who's going to work? All of those financial obligations are then put upon the intended parent.
Yes.
Right? But then, of course, the scariest is premature delivery, right? So, and nobody can predict that. So, yes, of course, there are risk factors, but there are surrogates without risk factors who've delivered prematurely. And the problem with that, of course, is the baby's not mature. Nothing is mature. The brain, the heart, the lung, the intestines, the eyes, nothing is mature. So then with that comes the immediate medical complications of prematurity. And then, of course, the not so obvious, right? Long-term medical complications such as learning disabilities. And so that's really the risk they're taking, is the potential medical risk, and nobody knows if it will happen or will not happen for their children. And then, of course, increased risk of a cesarean section, which many surrogates don't like, that they have to deliver by C-section. And then for all my intended parents who don't live in the United States, because in the United States, when your twins are born, your insurance will cover the bills of the baby, the hospital bill. But for my intended parents who live internationally and they don't have private insurance that will cover the baby's hospital bill, you now have to purchase insurance for twins, because in the United States, we do not have national health care. So health care for one baby is decently priced.
Yes.
Healthcare for twins is incredibly expensive. I mean, it's more than quadruple the price, right? And they do that intentionally to discourage you from having twins. So many factors to take into consideration. And I discuss with my intended parents to make sure they are making a very well-informed decision.
So just to highlight for a moment, Dr. Park, so I think people think, okay, well, if my babies are born a little bit early, okay, so they're not fully developed, they'll catch up, it's no problem. But both for emotional and even financial reasons, extended stays in the NICU, having developmental delays, maybe significant developmental delays, having other problems fail to thrive. There are other issues, right, that could come up as a result of being born prematurely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that many intended parents who desire these twins, usually it's because they know somebody who had twins and everything went fine. And that is our hope for everybody, that everything goes fine. But the problem is when it doesn't. And maybe the baby delivers maybe 35 weeks. Okay, it's not bad. But the concern is when they deliver very, very early, and nobody can predict that. So
yes. And there are actual cases, even though people don't see them very often, where there are multiples and there are significant, like lifelong problems for some of those kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And I've had cases where, unfortunately, the twins delivered at 23 weeks, which is right at that cusp of viability. And either they both didn't make it or one made it, one didn't. And it's hard because you have to grieve. It's a huge loss, right? So the mental, the emotional aspect of that loss is significant.
So it's so important that patients sit down with you and discuss all of these things, Dr. Park, before they make decisions, because so many of these decisions are so emotionally charged and very, very intense at the moment. But it's very hard to kind of think down the line. I'm not just thinking about pregnancy. I'm thinking about having a healthy person who's going to grow up to be a healthy adult. And am I thinking about how that's going to happen? And it's so important for people to try to grasp that with their doctor.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So this is so helpful, Dr. Park. Thank you so much. Are there things that we're missing or some things that maybe we should share with the audience that we haven't touched on yet?
I think the biggest takeaway is people have to understand this truly is a partnership between the intended parents and the surrogate, and of course with the agency. And I know that people compare their relationship with maybe their friends had a different relationship with their surrogate. There's no right or wrong relationship. Some people are just super close to their surrogates, and some people are not, and that's okay too. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that just really try to be respectful of each other but really make this a partnership in the journey so that it's a win-win for all parties involved, right? A great positive experience for everybody.
Yes. And it can be
Yeah,
such a beautiful relationship and such a beautiful experience.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for this, Dr. Park, and thank you for all you do to help create these beautiful families. We really appreciate you. And thank you for giving us your wisdom and your heart, because everyone out there really needs to be educated about these things that are so important.
Oh, you're welcome, Lisa. And thank you for inviting me. I know you do so much work in really helping people get through this journey, which is so important. So thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure. And tell me where people can reach you, Dr. Park. How can people reach out to you?
So my email is spark, SPARK, at SD for San Diego, fertility.com. Or our website is sdfertility.com for San Diego Fertility Center.
Great, great. And it's okay for people to reach out and ask you questions.
Yep, absolutely.
Wonderful. That's very generous of you. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone who came today. I really appreciate your time. It's so important to get this information and to go into these journeys with some information in your pocket before you make these really lifelong, huge decisions. And so I hope that this was helpful for you. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe, because that's how we keep going. And I will see you next week. Hi, it's Lisa Schumann. I hope that you enjoyed that video, and I hope it helped you. And if it did, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe, because that's how we keep going. It's really important to us. And if you liked it, you might like this one.